So the driving goal behind all of the work we do in our West Allis-West Milwaukee School District is to provide equitable learning opportunities for all of our students to ensure they are prepared to live life on their own terms when they graduate. So as a district, we have developed equity non-negotiables as our belief statements that focus on building upon our learners' strengths by embedding the deeper learning competencies into every classroom. Now, this work is important, but this work is also hard. It's human work. It's important to remember that we don't have all the answers and no one is perfect. The goal of this series is not to be a monologue, but rather to have honest discussions from which we can learn. In talking across differences, ourselves and our communities have the opportunity to grow, have the opportunity to be challenged, and to understand more fully the experience of others. That's the power of conversation. While dialogue alone does not solve structural problems, it is a good place to start. So Margaret Wheatley, she's a leading leadership theorist, says it like this: "We do not fear people whose stories we know." So we continue our equity journey by sharing our stories and dismissing fear.
Deidre, thanks for sitting down with us again to talk about equity through deeper learning. And one of the things that I have noticed when looking at our district's strategic plan is that it's a very unique plan as far as the way that the goals and the strategies are set up for our district. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So strategic planning was something, again, that our superintendent, Dr. Lexman, came to our district and brought to us. We didn't have a comprehensive strategic plan. What are you trying to do? And then how are you going to measure whether or not you're doing that? And so at that time that he came into our district, we were having some financial difficulties and we were having some pushback from the community on a lot of the work we were doing and not necessarily satisfied with some of the work we were doing. We were having test scores and school reports on a decline. So we had to say, what are you going to work on in your school district? And so a whole huge committee of people came together that included parents and every employee from every employee group and said, okay, how do we narrow our focus to work on the things that really mean something to this community? And so it turned out to be 4 building blocks that are in the whole plan is front to back on one page front to back. And you can find it right on our website, and it's, we put it out in as many places as possible because it's a community-driven goal for us. But it includes the equity through deeper learning work as part of the life readiness category. And that used to be called college and career readiness. And now we've changed the language and amended the language in this strategic plan to really talk about life readiness through college and career planning. Because our kids are maybe going on to college, but maybe they're not. And that's okay if that's not your journey. We need to make sure you're prepared for life. And some of that is getting you ready for college, if that's what's in your plan. And some of that's getting you ready for a trade school, if that's what's in your plan, or getting ready to be an entrepreneur and starting your own business, if that's what's in your plan. So getting a focus around those life readiness skills was really important. And then we have building blocks around community engagement and culture, because we want to work on staff retention and we want to work on our staff being really engaged in the work that we're trying to do as an organization. We used to say all the time, the district does this and the district does this. And it was really intentional to shift our language to our district, because we all work here on behalf of the learners we get to serve every day. And we have to make sure that then we're all together in achieving those goals. And then we have other building blocks that are around finance and facilities and figuring all of those things out. And we had made such nice progress on many of the elements in our strategic plan. You usually do a 5-year plan that a few years in, the board asked us to refresh it, because some of the work we were seeing some really good outcomes from, and we wanted to push ourselves even harder for the next set of goals. The other nice part about that is it then tells you everything we're working on. So we want to steer away from words like initiatives and things like that, because that implies it's something we're going to do for a short period of time and no longer do. Everything we introduce is in that strategic plan, and it is a tool maybe that we add to help us achieve a goal, but there's nothing that's going to be rolled out or new to the staff or to the community that's not outlined in that 5-year plan. When we get to each one of those elements, changes all the time with the work that as it evolves every day. But that's really how we started to frame a bunch of that work. So when we're doing planning around life readiness through college and career skills and want to do things like student-led businesses or more opportunities to empower the students, we have to work really closely with our financial team to be able to say, hey, is that within the scope of what we can reasonably afford within our budget? And if it's not, then we have to figure out other ways to deal with that. Or if we're doing that really good work, we want our community to know about it. So we want to push out into the greater community to say, how does this work then impact influence in our community? And how does it create space for our community as a whole to grow around the work we're doing in our schools?
So you talk about how important community is to this work a lot. So I'm curious if there's been any pushback, and if there has been, how you've handled it.
Of course there's pushback. And pushback is welcome in a lot of times, right? If somebody doesn't share with you the parts of the work that they would challenge or things that they find frustrated about, then you probably don't have really good avenues for communication. So we are thankful when we get input about the work that we're doing is supported and people appreciate it. We are thankful when people reach out with suggestions or other things we maybe could be thinking about doing. And we're thankful when somebody says, hey, I don't like this. And it's not that I'm thankful someone doesn't like something, but I'm thankful that we get the opportunity to say, help me understand what you don't understand about what we were trying to do, or let me help you understand the why behind what the intent was behind that activity or behind that element. And that has really helped our community to have a better understanding around what equity work actually means to us, which is truly about creating inclusive communities that, regardless of your lens on anything, have a voice and have a space. And how do we value that and help you understand where your voice and your life experiences and what you're going to learn in this classroom all contribute to you being able to do great things and achieve academic standards, and then also be ready to leave us with a plan that works for you and works for your family. So there's always pushback. Pushback comes sometimes from people just not understanding that true intention of the work and how it's not valuing one group of people over another. It's creating that inclusive space and community where every voice can be heard, and not only to be heard, but to be welcomed and appreciated. And then, that person can share the next idea that they have, and that they have a place for all of those things. And we want our constituents to know that as well, that we're open to hearing the feedback. And sometimes people are going to disagree with what you do, and that's part of the nature of working in public service, is that is going to happen. And we hope that once we're clear around the why of what we're doing, that people are ready to come along with us. And we're finding that more and more. And then we're still going to have some that, don't always agree with the direction. And we do our best to try to meet the needs of everybody in our broader and greater community, as well as the needs of every learner who walks through our door every day.
You talked about making a space where every learner feels comfortable, feels accepted, is pushed to define what life on their own terms means. Part of that work and part of what guides that work in our district is our equity non-negotiables. Can you talk about kind of the genesis of those and how those are used to help kind of make decisions across our district?
Sure, yeah. Our equity non-negotiables we adopted in June of 2019 to replace our belief statements. So in our last refresh of the strategic plan, we updated our vision and our mission, which is pretty common. That's part of what you do when you do strategic planning. But the belief statements were really important to us. The ones we had before were well written and they were good and they were things we could stand behind, but they weren't quite the bold statements around supporting every single learner that we are more focused on in our work now. So we spent an entire year with our leadership team meeting every single month. And so our leadership team are principals, instructional coaches, district office staff, deans of students, assistant principals, all the people in that category. And we came together and we really took a hard look at what are we doing well and where do we have room for improvement. So we did an audit of everything. How many students are taking advanced placement courses, and how many students are in music, and is each one of those demographically representative of the community that we serve? And if it's not, is there an opportunity in there to welcome more people into those spaces? Sports and extracurriculars are super important to feeling that sense of belonging in school. But are we capturing all of our students to be engaged in not just the daily academic work, but also those bigger pieces that contribute to a whole school and a whole community? So we spent a whole year looking at where are there gaps in some of that data. And where are there missed opportunities, and how many times are our kids who need additional supports leaving classrooms and core instruction to get there? And then we started to say, well, what work really matters to us? And that whole year-long process led to us creating this list of equity non-negotiables. And they are the things that we're going to stand behind every day. What we realized this year is that we hadn't done as much to mobilize those. So if they're your belief statements, they really should drive your actions. And so we hadn't, every employee wasn't as familiar with them as they should be. And we've done a lot more work with that this year to get people to understand those are strong statements. And they mean, if that's what you say you believe, then we better be able to see action that kind of backs that up. And so our board has been really supportive of all of the work we've done up until this point. And the thing I love about our board is they'll also push back if they hear something that they think, oh, that one doesn't make sense, or that's not something that I can support. And then we worked through that with that whole leadership team, and then brought them to the board and got feedback, and then brought them back again. And then they were approved by our board to really stand behind that firm belief of what we're doing in schools. And then they start to we use some of them in interview questions when we hire new staff. We use them when we're having conversations with parents around understanding the work we're trying to do. And so that helps people really to understand the bigger picture of the work.
So number 2 of our equity non-negotiables is together we are responsible for the unmet potential. How do we ensure we don't leave unmet potential on the table?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And unmet potential sounds like such a negative thing. So you hate that that's kind of some of the language, but that is part of it. When we did some investigation on how many of our students 5 years out of high school are employed in a job that they love, or how many of them have finished college if that was their pathway, or those questions, we weren't as comfortable with some of what we were seeing. We wanted our kids to have more purpose and more intention. And so if 5 years out of college, you have no idea, or 5 years out of high school, you have no idea what you want to do still or who you want to be, then there's probably unmet potential there that somewhere along your pathway somebody didn't tap into. And it comes back to that just ultimate belief that when a learner walks in the classroom, they've got this and they can do it. They may need lots of additional time and lots of scaffolds and a ton of creative thinking on how to best meet their needs. And that goes from our students who are naturally academically gifted and have IQ scores that are far higher than mine, that need us to think about how do we engage them in super high level thinking and practice around that at early ages. But then how do we engage everybody in super high level thinking and problem solving? And if you're struggling at school, how do we make sure that school is a safe place for you and that it's safe for the people around you when you're not having the best of days, by adding the right supports to be sure that on that day we find what's going on with you and we can help get you back engaged to what we're trying to do at school.
I love that connection between preventing unmet potential and then helping a student on the pathway to living their life on their own terms. I love how that's connected.
Yeah, it's an important connection for us because that is what it is, right? And for anybody who's changed careers a number of times, and we're trying, the buzzword is we're trying to prepare kids for jobs that haven't yet been invented, and that they'll go out and invent their own jobs. Well, okay, that's great, except we have to make sure that they know what that means and how do they go out and be entrepreneurial in the world and how do they go out and do some of those things. And now they say kids will change careers multiple times in their lifetime. not just jobs. So I'm a teacher and I work at this district or that district, but whole careers. I was a lawyer and now I want to be a doctor or things like that. So there's an adaptability and a flexibility to that. That means you have to be thinking about you and who you are and your skills and what you're good at and what skills you still need to develop all the time to be ready to face whatever's going to be in your pathway next. And that you've got the confidence about that so that when you get derailed, which we all do in our life plan, you've got the moment to say, here are the supports I need to bring in to help me, or here's what I've got in me that's going to help me be resilient and get through this next moment.
In light of everything that we've been through in 2020, now into 2021, how is our district's equity work carrying forward during this rather uncertain time?
It certainly has been the most interesting year in education and in the world that we've seen in our lifetimes. And thankfully, it looks like we're coming to at least a bright spot in some of that. And we've been able to reopen schools and 2 days a week for kids. And that's been really important. I think the challenge in the equity work is it's really about that sense of community and the belief in every learner and knowing that it just may take us more time to get there, depending on the circumstances. Well, we've just had a year that has been a whole lot of really difficult circumstances. We have learners that have experienced family loss, and we have teachers that have experienced family loss, and we've lost members of our employee group in the course of this time. We've had people hit financial hardships that they had never seen before, and we have students who are experiencing fear and isolation in a way that they never have had to see before either. So as we're moving forward in our equity work, it's more important than ever. Let's recognize who we are as people right now and know that we can get caught up together as a community. We're watching our learners and their families be engaged around academic things in whole new ways, because one of the bright spots of all of this has been how we've communicated with parents. We didn't explain to parents before why we did our phonemes in particular order when kids are learning to read, right? But now we do, because the parents are doing a lot of that work with the students at home. And so we're seeing a carryover of not just some of the academic skills, but we're seeing that carryover of the check-ins with each other and making sure people are okay. And that sense of community and bonding is going to help those academic skills grow really quickly once we're all able to continue pushing forward. Our teachers did some amazing work during virtual instruction that actually met our kids' needs in a new and interesting way. There were huge bright spots about that. Some students would prefer to continue learning that way because of some of the work they experienced. So how do we take that and help those students use that learning experience to grow? And then how do we figure out what we're going to do differently for the students for whom this didn't work? And that's a big part of our work, is how do we look at the learner and who they are and what they're trying to be when they leave us, and say, how do we tailor the learning experience within the standards that we need to teach that school year, within the content pieces that we need to make sure that our kids have to be prepared. But how do we wrap all of that together to say, ooh, your learning pathway just got clearer because you figured out something about yourself during this time that we now know and we can use at school to help you grow and move forward. And even with all of the PPE and plexiglass and all of the things that we spend so much time talking about this year, our learners are still making those connections to each other. Some beautiful pictures coming out of schools last week of kids like holding hands between pieces of plexiglass, like two young children putting their hand up on the plexi to hold hands with the student on the other side of them. That comes because those kids felt connected to each other, even though the instruction was virtual. And when they got back into the space, that was the new way they did that. So we're proud of the fact that we have many, many classroom communities where kids are feeling that support, whether they're virtual, whether they're face-to-face, or what happens. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do. Make sure that kids know this is the kind of learning that's meeting their needs and helping them grow. And if it's not, that we've got a new plan. And we're going to adapt over and over and over again to be sure that everybody gets that opportunity to succeed.
Yeah, well, thanks for sitting down with us. I love how you were able to describe from a big picture level with the strategic plan how our equity non-negotiables tie into that work, and then how it's laid out in a classroom. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.